would like to hear kind of what you noticed about wholesome and unwholesome or any other aspect of this topic during the week. I always love the report from the front, and or anything that you want to respond to in the talk that I gave. All that is welcome. Okay, Jim. There you are in your corner.
Okay, hi Mark.
Hi.
Well, this is interesting to me because it's something that's never happened to me before. And this is a belly thing, and I'm not. It's a physical thing. I've woken up out of a sound sleep feeling nauseous,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess because it's never happened before, I'm wondering if I should start tuning into what may have happened during the day or what's going on in my life. Because I know I feel like I'm in transition right now. So I know what you mean by belly intelligence. I think I do anyway. But anyway, this seems like a clear message that something's going on.
Yeah, it seems like more than just indigestion. It seems like
Yeah.
it has an emotional meaning. Yeah.
It absolutely does. And I'm going, well, what did I eat? Oh no, I mean, it's not that at all. So my belly's obviously telling me something, and takes me a while to get back to sleep again. So yeah, I think it might have something to do with this transition into from working to not working, and sort of really trying to discern whether I should work at all right now, because I don't know if that makes me feel good anymore. I mean, it's always a concern about money, but so this may not be to your point, but it occurs to me that because this is so unusual for me, that maybe it's worth talking about.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And it just, I get an intuitive kind of sense that yes, it has something to do with this transition that you're in and something that's being felt in the belly that you haven't quite let be conscious, haven't quite integrated. It's
You're
a
right.
big transition. That stopping work is a big deal.
It is.
So much of our sense of ourselves comes from our work. And I've, I know through my own counseling business that, I've guided people through retirement, and it's not what it's not exactly what it's advertised to be, like pure bliss. And it's a real transition. It's a real shift in your being from a mode you've been in for 40 years or more.
Right.
Yeah. And it can really challenge your sense of value.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a
And
challenge.
it can be an invitation to come back to the value that you have, which isn't about what you're good for other people.
Right. Yes. I mean, it is what we were saying. What's appropriate for me right now,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and finding the truth within. So if that's belly stuff, boy, I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a work in progress right now. I don't have any other clues other than that. So I'll just keep an eye on that and
keep an eye on it and check back in if you get any insights.
I will.
The
Yeah.
one thing that I can suggest is to send to your belly the message that you're inviting it to actually, that you're interested in it and inviting it to communicate more with you.
Yeah.
Which is a much better thing to do than just feeling aversion to the feeling of nausea or thinking there's something wrong,
Right.
to actually invite it to come into consciousness, whatever's there.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jim. So does anybody have a word about discerning wholesome and unwholesome this week? Okay, Beth.
Hi. So, this morning I was walking to an appointment and I passed I guess he was homeless, a guy sitting on the street with a sign. And I gave him some money and then I went to the appointment and on the way back I passed the same guy and he asked for more money. And then I was like, "Well, I already gave you some. Is there something else you need?" And he just was like pushing for money. And then I was like, "How about something to drink?" And he's like, um get me a Pepsi or whatever. And then I walked away to go get him a Pepsi and I was like, I don't want to buy him a Pepsi. And I realized that like it felt unwholesome. It had like a clear unwholesome quality. And for a while I was really confused about it because like it in my mind it was like the thing to do would be to give him more. Um but I guess like eventually it occurred to me that I was like going against myself because I kind of already said no and then I didn't say no.
Yes.
And I also noticed that like walking to my appointment, I had this like more like lightness and interest in the people I passed and just sort of a different feel. And then after that interaction, I had sort of like a hardness about me and like this like closed in kind of thing happening. So what that was kind of interesting too.
Yeah. All right, good. You noticed it. You noticed the change in the feeling tone. And how it, let's see if I can put it this way, how it's not what you think. You might think you're doing the right thing in some sense, but check in with yourself. All right, Robin.
So I had sort of kind of a similar experience in my neighborhood. We had a block party, and there was a person who moved into the neighborhood within the last year. And when this person came to the block party, I had a visceral reaction to them, like kind of like, whoa, stay away from this person. And I could feel it in my belly, and it was like this wall came down. And then I ran into this person again today, and it was an entirely different experience where it felt like, oh, I can really connect with this person and it feels good. And this person feels more accessible and open. And it was such a contrast between first meeting this person to second time meeting this person and the comparison of both of them. Feeling it, in my belly and my heart center of really drawn to this person today and really repulsed by this person the other day.
Yeah.
Such a contrast and so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's hard to know what the information is there in the repulsion and in the attraction.
What I think happened was because this person was coming in to this group of people who already knew each other. And maybe that person was putting out some vibes of feeling insecure or unsure of themselves. And then today it was just this person was walking with their partner, and it was just the three of us.
Yeah. Perhaps you felt their discomfort in some way.
Yeah.
And, sometimes people become a little artificial in social situations when they're shy or they're uncomfortable. And we're really sensitive, being, kind of herd animals that we are. We pick that up. So maybe, I'm not sure. Keep awake around your interactions with this person, and particularly the belly. Check in with the belly. And sometimes our belly intelligence gets conditioned by things that are not necessarily the truth. you know People remind us of something from our past.
Well, it was a
So
nice shifting, I have to say.
yeah, nice
Yeah.
shifting. I'm glad.
Yeah.
It's nice to feel good about your neighbor.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
When you start to notice wholesome and unwholesome, you'll just see how common it is. Yes, Diane.
Friday, I had what felt like a wonderfully wholesome conversation with a colleague. We were actually talking about the Barbie movie, and it was just fun. It was a really rough week. We just had a great conversation. Then I said something. About a minute after I said it, I felt regret. And then her reaction was totally benign. So I passed it off, but I ruminated all day about this comment. She's a colleague, she's a Black woman. We've had beautiful conversations about racism and anti-racism. And I kept questioning myself. Did I say something racist? And usually because we've had these conversations, she'll bring it up, but she didn't say anything and she left laughing, but it was, eating away at me. So finally the next day I sent her an email explaining, it was this racist, please tell me, because I'm learning. But I was so uncomfortable. It was just this sudden abrupt change from having this wonderful conversation. It was uplifting, feel it in your chest and fun. And she replied, and she did say, she thought about it too. She was a little surprised by it, but anyway, yesterday, face to face, we had a good conversation about it. But boy, what a contrast. And I felt shame, I felt remorse and regret. It was just a horrible feeling. And I was restless. I couldn't settle until I did something about it. So it was,
Yes.
to me, I'm even embarrassed discussing it, but it all, it was a learning experience. And she said, awareness is a big part of it. And it's all good, but boy, unwholesome didn't feel good.
Unwholesome doesn't feel good.
Especially when I generate it. Yes.
And you realize that some things require an action. To come back into integrity sometimes requires an action. It requires speech and connecting with someone. And you saw how sensitive your system is to that unwholesomeness. It registered right away. It registered with the person there. And in the Buddhist psychology, shame is actually a wholesome feeling. I have to qualify that a little bit, because what is meant by it is healthy shame. When you do something that is socially hurtful, you should feel shame. That's a natural response of a social animal, or I sometimes call them a herd animal because I like animals. It's an appropriate response. And sometimes people are shameless, and that's an unwholesome response, where they do things that they actually should be ashamed of, and they do them shamelessly. So that's the perspective of Buddhist psychology. I have to, kind of also say that many people feel a kind of a pathological shame, where they're ashamed of themselves when they actually have nothing to be ashamed of. It's just been conditioned in them, usually from being manipulated and yelled at, and or ridiculed, or all sorts of things kind of implant this automatic kind of shame in people, which is actually an unwholesome feeling, and very, very difficult. But it seems like the example you gave was actually of a wholesome shame. It's painful to the mind, and in a way that's appropriate. And you restored integrity. You restored it through reaching out and so forth. It's part of this, attuned life that we have to lead as human beings. It's really about attunement. And even the fact that you talk about racism and anti-racism is about attunement. It's about, and so oftentimes as a white person, it's easy to be oblivious. Really easy to be oblivious. And so that kind of ignorance is out of attunement with people around. And it takes effort to become attuned again to what the other actually feels, what the actual impact is of the way you behave. So thank you for your example. It was really helpful. All right, and did you want to say anything more? Or are you? Okay, good. So who else? So Bryony.
I had a strong experience of unwholesome the day after our class last week. That many in the group will sound familiar, because being in the car is like a real place of practice. Driving is for me.
Mm-hmm.
So on Wednesdays, I see clients in person. So I was driving to Hadley. I had, enough time. There was no reason for me to be impatient. And it was a beautiful morning. So it first started out wholesome. And I think I even noted, because I have a daily kind of, is this suffering or not suffering right now kind of inquiry throughout the day. So it's similar, this is like beautiful morning and I feel fortunate. And then somebody went like 10 miles under the speed limit in front of me and I lost my shit. So embarrassing. The experience was, it was like being lost in a movie. It was completely identified, like this person shouldn't be driving like this. They're obviously not paying attention, And then I remembered, I'm so happy for the assignment, because it's like, oh, wow. So it's like the video zoomed in inside. I wasn't like, and there was this really uncomfortable burning in my chest, in my belly, tightness. And I did have a flash of shame, like a flash of shame, and then analyzing like, oh, this is a legacy burden. My dad and my brother are like super impatient, and they taught me to drive, and I've inherited this, So I felt some compassion and kind of laughed at myself for this whole kind of inquiry. But something about getting behind the wheel, I just immediately am like, can get to unwholesome states. So the noticing the unpleasant was just a really important feedback loop of how much of a choice it is,
Thank you. I think you have a lot of company in
anybody else get pissed off?
Yeah. Anybody else? Everybody want to raise your hand if you find driving to be challenging that way. There's something about driving, I think, kind of, it's really easy to lose your integrity. It's really easy to go into a kind of a trance in a variety of ways, both the trance of where you're trying to get to and your mind going off thinking about other things. It can be a very disembodied experience. And then, like parts of us, conditioned parts of us can take over, like the rageful driver or the impatient driver. These things, they take us over, and we lose our connection with our bodies and ourselves, so easily. So, I've done some like work just being mindful in a car, and it's a hard thing to do, I think. There's just a lot of conditioning not to be present. So it's a really rich place to explore.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bryony. You actually took my example from the week has to do with driving. And so there's kind of a difficult intersection at the end of my street in South Deerfield. I call it the Great Sea of Asphalt. You have to like cross this huge expanse of asphalt to get onto Sugarloaf going south. And meanwhile, over here, there's this four-way stop which is feeding people in, and there's all this kind of complicated patterns, and people can come out from alleys and so forth. So yeah, it's like venturing out there is kind of difficult. You really have to pay attention. So I ventured out, and I thought I had space, and this black pickup truck kind of charged across the four-way stop and sped really much faster than normal. It got up right behind me, and continued to tailgate. So I was just kind of noticing this part of my mind that kind of locked onto that. Like, this is a problem. Not that I was afraid of what this guy would do, but just judging, feeling aversion, and then noticing who's suffering here. This guy may be suffering. Actually, seeing it that way makes it actually more okay that he drives that way. It's an expression of suffering to, go so fast and tailgate in your big truck. It's an expression of suffering. But the more important truth is, in all that self-judgment, all that judgment of him, I'm suffering. There I am. And it isn't like that just dispelled it. But there was a little bit of distance, and I could just kind of see there's just this part of my consciousness that locked on to that truck and didn't let go of it until I made a left turn, and the truck didn't. And it wasn't behind me anymore. Like something just like stayed with that. Maybe there's a little bit of danger to it. I don't think so. But it was just more like this consciousness when you're out on the road, of this sense of competition and unfriendliness, whatever it is. That was my noticing unwholesome. All right, Allison.
So I cut out at one point, so I missed something that you might have said about guilt. I think it was at some point my computer went down, but I'm trying to sort of negotiate this thing about how to stay within what is right for me in the moment through my body feeling, and perhaps what sort of, okay, listening from the external, listening to in, but also not necessarily moving or not moving because of either fear or aversion or past trauma.
You get frozen.
Yeah, and having sometimes a hard time to discern when I really do, like, when is self-care really actually sort of yielding, stopping, and when is it actually harmful and a pattern, like almost like dissociating. And I don't have answers, but I've been noticing also like sort of being out sometimes in nature and sort of wanting very much like, noticing the clouds or the trees and sort of almost wanting to really be in like a dream state. And sometimes like, oh, is this feels whole? Is this wholesome? Is this not? I mean, it feels like sort of like what a child might be, but it also might not be. Like, when is it an escape? And some of this is from the past. I know it's like sort of when it things feel good or might feel right, an escape, and when is it avoidance? And not always really being able to come out with a really clear.
So one thing, I think I've learned about you over the years of coming to my class, Allison, is that your head gets confused.
Yeah.
And so notice that intelligence is like trying to figure it out. Is it an escape? Is it good? And the information that you're looking for isn't actually there at your head level. You really do have to come down here and hear for the answer. And and kind of move through that. So that's one thing that I would want to say is that a lot of the questions that you go like this with,
Part of it is
that
the
your energy
connection
is
to the belly. When you talk about the belly, it's like, and when we're talking about nausea, sometimes it's getting
there can be
uncomfortable
hard.
feeling and not knowing like what to do with that. And that's when going, it's going between.
Yes, there's an uncomfortable feeling, and that's where the head like sees a problem and it's trying to solve it and it isn't getting anywhere. So something really simple is when you're frozen, know that you're frozen. So there's a difference between being frozen, period, and being frozen and actually knowing that that's the state you're in. Once you know that you're in the state of frozen, there's a degree of self-presence, maybe self-compassion even for that frozen one. You can investigate from there. And, the tendency to freeze is a complicated one. It's usually rooted in trauma, as you know. And, and part of what makes it hard for you to come down from your head is that there are things down here that are hard to feel, hard to know. And so that frozenness is protecting you. Perhaps, not so helpfully, but it's certainly trying to protect you. So oftentimes, just the one thing you can do when you notice that you're kind of frozen or you can't decide, just be mindful. Just notice that about yourself. And just feel the shift that causes. There's just a margin of wholesomeness when you notice, oh wow, I'm frozen and I don't actually have access to whole parts of myself. There's something that feels wholesome in that, just that little shift.
It's interesting that you say wholesome because often that's when I feel a lot of self-loathing.
Okay, well, that's the danger of awareness, is that judgment kind of comes in and globs on self-loathing. See, that's different than mindfulness. Mindfulness is non-judgmental awareness. So if you're non-judgmentally aware of frozen, you're not judging yourself. The judgment is a further kind of unwholesome feeling that comes, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me. And I can completely understand that in terms of, how dysfunctional you can be when parts of you are frozen, that another part of you can be kind of mad about that. But somewhere inside, and I do believe you, in some place in you do understand this, Allison, that what you're experiencing is the result of causes and conditions of the past. You're actually not to blame. And even the self-loathing is kind of like an unskillful response in the midst of all these causes and conditions, you know? So just kind of like being able to tease it apart. It's really helpful if you find a non-judgmental presence with what is. In this case, even non-judgmental presence with your tendency to loathe yourself, criticize yourself. Even that you can actually be mindful of in a non-judgmental way. It's like, oh, wow, there's that self-criticism. Ouch, that hurts. You know, that kind of presence. It's the, you know, it's kind of the heart of the shift that the Dharma is pointing to, is right in that kind of non-judgmental moment with whatever arises. So we're going to need to stop here because we're past our time. Y'all have a good week, and I think I've given you some things to work with. Continue to notice wholesome and unwholesome for the rest of the class and the rest of your life, but also kind of add some of that exploration of the belly intelligence to it. And we'll talk next week, see where that took you. All right, everyone, be well. Take care.